On today's show, the Detroit Red Wings win streak is over at 7. We'll look back at the impressive run it was and the loss to the San Jose Sharks. Plus, speaking of losses, the Penguins are finding themselves sliding down the standings. And Zach Werenski for Norris?
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Wednesday, January 15th edition of Locked On NHL. We're your team every day. We've got local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Coming up on the show, we're going to hear from Brian Fisher from Locked On Red Wings, JD Young from Locked On San Jose Sharks, and Hunter Hodes from Locked On Penguins, breaking down the latest for each of their teams. We'll also get into the Zach Werenski buzz. This guy is having a heck of a season, and the Columbus Blue Jackets wake up today in a playoff spot. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. With me, it's the Battle of Ontario edition. Mike DiStefano from Locked On Maple Leafs. Mikey, what's going on, brother? Happy New Year. It's been a while.
I know it has been a while. Went through, we had Christmas, then New Year, and then I was on vacation, and it's all been pretty good. How you been, pal? What's going on over in Sens land?
Good, man. It's all good here. We had a bit of a divot, we could call it, in the course after Linus Ullmark went down. Like, Ullmark's still 8-0-1 in his last 9 games played, but got injured there in Edmonton. They go 1-5-1 in their next 7 games. Felt like the sky was falling. They had that monster 9-game road trip when the World Juniors came to Ottawa. That was a tough ending to it. And they finally come home, Mikey, and lay an egg 4-0 loss to the Buffalo Sabres. So things were looking pretty bleak, but now 3 wins in their last 4 games, including 2 shutouts from 22-year-old Levi Merrilainen. Like, how often do you see a goalie play back-to-back games in 2 consecutive days, let alone a 22-year-old rookie? And his second half of that, he beats the Dallas Stars at home. Like that, this is a pretty impressive run right now for Levi Merrilainen, a name that I'm not sure too many hockey fans are familiar with yet.
No, not a lot of guys. Like if I didn't have his Young Guns rookie card, I don't think I would know who he is either. But it's good to hear as someone who does have a couple of those cards that he's playing well. Let me tell you.
Well,
but yeah,
it's one of those, Mikey, just quickly, where at the 2020 draft, when he was picked, all the analysts are like, yeah, never heard of him. He wasn't even ranked on the NHL Central scouting site. Nobody knew who he was. And he goes 71st overall.
It makes the NHL and is doing pretty darn well so far with the Ottawa Senators. So, hey, good on him. Good on him. As a young kid, and they're starting to win some games again and keep themselves back in the fold when it comes to the wild card and a playoff spot. Because for a minute there, it felt like, things aren't looking good. Looks like they're kind of fading back towards the middle of the pack again after they had established themselves as a playoff team just before Christmas. And looks like they're back on the up and up. What's the latest with Ullmark? Is he scheduled to get back anytime soon?
It's a back injury, right? Those are harder to diagnose than a broken bone or that sort of thing, or strain. So it's a day-to-day or a week-to-week. Last week is what Travis Green, the head coach, said. But hey, he's buying himself some time with the play of Merrilainen because it was tough there. Forsberg wasn't getting very much production. Like in 9 games this year, career 9 games, for Merrilainen. He's got 6 starts this year, and he's already got more wins than Forsberg, who's played 15 games versus 6. So really, really gives him some time. But I know a lot of poolies out there hoping for Ullmark to get back sooner rather than later. You can find us on Locked On Senators for more on that. But you mentioned the wild card race. It is as close and can be, and teams are vaulting their way up with unbelievable runs like we saw with Todd McClellan coming in Detroit. They lose the first game under McClellan, but after that, 7 straight wins. They beat Ottawa in overtime. They beat some good teams. They beat Washington. They beat Winnipeg on that run. And it comes to an end against the San Jose Sharks. They're a pesky team, although they are lower in the standings. Let's hear from Locked On Red Wings host Brian Fisher.
As it turns out, the Detroit Red Wings are not going to win out the rest of the season. Their 7-game winning streak is snapped at the hands of the lowly San Jose Sharks, 6-3 at LCA. This is obviously a frustrating loss because you're playing a team that you should, by all intents and purposes, beat, but they had honestly a sloppy game against the Kraken. Goals came way too easy. They had a sloppy second half. Then with an off day, they didn't have an opportunity to address that. They came out, they played sloppy again, and they got burned a couple times. Defensive lapses, poor goaltending, and losing the special teams battles, especially a shorthanded goal, not capitalizing on your power plays, and a goal against on the Sharks power play really spelled the end for the Detroit Red Wings. Every time they pulled within one goal, the Sharks pulled right back ahead. So this is the end of their homestand. They pull off 7 wins in a row. It was an incredible stretch, but now they have to reset and respond because they have a tough road swing ahead of them. Stay tuned for more on Locked On Red Wings.
There's Brian Fisher, Locked On Red Wings, one of the good guys on the network. We always appreciate his insights. What was your take on the Red Wings win streak, and is it a hot streak, or is this sustainable success that, even though obviously they're not going to win out, as Brian said, they're going to be able to continue to remain in the hunt and challenge for a playoff spot in April?
Well, it is nice that it did put them back in the hunt, and now Detroit has something to play for the rest of the way, because prior to that, there really wasn't a whole lot to play for, but Tom McClellan's got them, in a pretty good spot right now, but it's just goes to show how rotten they were to start the year. They go on a 7-game winning streak, pick up 14 of 14 points, yet still aren't able to get themselves into a playoff spot. They're still 4 points out of a playoff spot behind the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they've got to leapfrog Montreal and Ottawa to get there as well. So, just goes to show how big of a hole they really dug themselves early on in the season. But it is nice to see them climb out of it. And, we've got, a pretty competitive race, like you mentioned. There are a lot of teams here that still are within 5 points of a wild card. You've got 7 teams within 5 points, 8 teams within 6 points of a wild card spot. So, it's nice to see Detroit pull themselves from deep into the standings and put themselves back into it.
And since Todd McClellan took over, they've been getting some serious offensive contributions from their top guys. Lucas Raymond, second in the National Hockey League in points since December 26th, the day of the coaching change. And Patrick Kane with 13 points in 9 games. So nice. He had been struggling early on in the season. He scored that OT winner against Ottawa, and he's been an absolute horse for them. Dylan Larkin with 12 points in 9 games. Like, the offense has been coming fast and furious, and I think that's something where Red Wings fans were like, we have too much talent to not be having the success that we need to have. Alex DeBrincat also with 11 points in 9 games. That's 4 players above a point per game in the 9 games under Todd McClellan. So we'll see how sustainable it is. I kept telling Red Wings fans, like, even if this isn't their year, they still have their next wave of prospects coming up in Nate Danielson, Axel Sandin Pellikka, and Michael Brandsegg Nygaard. Marco Kasper's in the lineup, but we think he has much more to give. And on the back end, Simon Edvinsson is a stud already, but he's going to be a minute-munching top pair defenseman in the National Hockey League. So I guess you're kind of buying time too. You got Sebastian Cossa in the minors right now as a 21-year-old, the youngest goalie with at least 1 win in the National Hockey League. Levi Marilainen, the youngest goalie with multiple wins, who we spoke about earlier. So the future is still bright in Detroit, but I think they're going to challenge for a playoff spot for sure. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't. I think it was more them underperforming at the start of the year than it was them kind of going on a hot streak with the new coach bump.
I think they'll challenge for sure. I definitely see them being a team that'll challenge, but whether or not they make the playoffs, I think is a different story. Currently, FanDuel has them at just plus 630 to make the playoffs. So if you think that Detroit can rattle off some wins here down the stretch in the back half and make the playoffs, you can get some decent value right now and get them at plus 630.
What are the odds for the San Jose Sharks to make the playoffs, Mikey?
The odds for the San Jose Sharks to make the playoffs.
Scroll.
They're not even there. They're literally, there are no odds on FanDuel for the San Jose Sharks. They have odds on the Ducks to make the playoffs, but not the San Jose Sharks. So the odds are 0, apparently, according to FanDuel.
Well, they do have some young, exciting talent, including Macklin Celebrini. Here's Locked On Sharks host JD Young recapping last night's win.
The Sharks snap the Detroit Red Wings 7-game win streak. I'm JD Young of Locked On Sharks, and the Sharks win 6-3 against the hottest team in the NHL. The big story from this game, of course, is the 70s line. William Eklund, Macklin Celebrini, and Tyler Toffoli combining for 7 points, with William Eklund leading the way with a goal and 2 assists. This line, anytime the Sharks needed a response, anytime Detroit pushed, this line answered. Celebrini with 2 beautiful assists, including one on the power play to Mikael Granlund. Really finding his groove again after this line has been put back together. So we'll have more about this game. Will Smith's nice response after his benching on your next episode of Locked On Sharks, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as.
And there is JD Young from Locked On San Jose Sharks. Still plenty to get to, including the Penguins slip down the standings. We'll look at the East wildcard race and wrap up today's show with some much-deserved praise for Zach Werenski. That's all coming up. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories, I attended a Leafs game last year. It was a great one. The Maple Leafs won, and I got my tickets cheap, and I got my tickets easy with Game Time. Recently, I was looking up some tickets for an upcoming event, and I was able to get them within 30 minutes of puck drop. Game Time has made it easier for you to get your tickets for your favorite events with their new feature called Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're a part of Locked On Podcast Network, where you can get local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week. Mikey, thank goodness we didn't start with the Pittsburgh Penguins, because we have breaking news. Have you seen the news that just released on Twitter?
No. You're breaking
Tristan Jarry will be placed on waivers today at 2:00.
Tough for Tristan Jarry. I mean, that's God. When he signed that deal, everyone had question marks. Everybody had question marks.
I had exclamation marks. There was profanity. How can you give him that deal?
Yeah, that was absurd. The fact he's making what, $6 million. Like, it's absurd what he's making, and he didn't quite earn it.
5.375 for 3 more years after this one. There is a 0% chance he gets claimed.
No, there's no shot. No team has taken a chance on him. He's been awful this season. 332 goals against, an 886 save percentage. I mean, 4 of his last 5 games, he has a save percentage of sub 900. Like, he just has not been good all year long. He's been given a reset already, where he was on a conditioning stint down in the minors, and he was sent home from like a road trip, and he still has not been able to bring back the play that, for whatever reason, allowed Pittsburgh to think like, we no longer need this guy. We no longer need Matt Murray, because Tristan Jarry is our guy. Turns out that's not the case. Now, whether or not Matt Murray would have been, I don't know. Maybe all along they should have just held on to Marc-Andre Fleury, who's still playing at a pretty good level out in Minnesota now. But yeah, that's some pretty tough news to hear for Tristan Jarry. And I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they can't get good goaltending. They're unable to really get a whole lot of secondary scoring. I mean, it's a team that struggles to defend. Man, it's really tough to see Sidney Crosby really not be much of a factor in a playoff race. I guess they're kind of in it, but like, the Penguins, man, it's a bad hockey team. Bad hockey
game with 0 goaltending at all. Nedeljkovic played against Ottawa on Saturday. He was just awful. I believe he had a .660 save percentage in that game before getting the hook. And I think I'm going to set a record for most times bringing up Levi Merlin in a podcast, but his tandem goalie in Finland, Joel Blomqvist, is playing in Wilkes-Barre. Maybe Kyle Dubas, noted Sens fan growing up, was watching Carolina and saying, wait, we got a kid down in Wilkes-Barre. Maybe we can solve some goaltending. He's got a .912 save percentage down there. Obviously, it's a little different playing in the National Hockey League, but he's shown at times. He's played 8 games this year, and although he's only got 3 wins, he's got a .904 save percentage, which is a hell of a lot better than the .886 that Tristan Jarry is providing them right now. Like, I mean, this to me, it's not a panic move. It's probably necessity. And Jarry was already sent home from a trip earlier this year and was put in a conditioning stint. So he has already played in Wilkes-Barre this year. It's just another tough balance for Tristan Jarry, and you got to get that out of the game, as he would say. But I'm not shocked, but I'm definitely.
How's this end though? Like, how's this end? Is this you're done? You're down in the minors, and no matter what he does with his game, is he done and then bought out at the end of the year? Like, is that how this ends? Tristan Jarry buyout at the end of the season?
Like, he's 4-1 in the minors this year with a .926 save percentage. Like,
what does that mean though? What does that do for you?
It means nothing. Well, it means that if he goes down there and plays well, it doesn't mean that he's going to come up and play well.
Exactly, because he's done that before, and he came back up, and it did not help with his confidence at all. So, yeah, I don't think it ends well with Tristan Jarry. I think this is buyout central waiting to happen this summer.
I kind of see it like the same as we just talked about the Red Wings, kind of like what they did with Ville Husso, where it's like, hey, if we need a goalie, you can spot start here, but for your cap hit, we can't afford to have you being bad in the back end. Now, we got this clip from Locked On Penguins after the loss to the Kraken. We'll hear what he has to say about Tristan Jarry there. Of course, this was recorded before the news that Tristan Jarry will be put on waivers later this afternoon.
Hey everyone, Hunter Hodes here with the Locked On Penguins podcast as the Pittsburgh Penguins lose yet again on Tuesday, this time to the Seattle Kraken by a final score of 4-2. The Penguins came out guns a blazing in this game. They were badly outplaying the Kraken in the first period. They were dominant in the second period, and then everything fell apart in the third period. The Penguins did a really poor job defending that lead. They were not good defensively in their own zone. And Tristan Jarry yet again was unable to come up with some timely saves for the Penguins. He continues to crush them night in and night out. They need to figure out something with this goaltending tandem. Him and Alex Nedeljkovic continue to cost the Penguins games on a nightly basis, and it's the biggest reason why they continue to fall in the standings. They have a massive 7-game road trip to end the month of January. That's going to be the big make or break stretch here for the Penguins if they can either A, stay afloat a little bit in the playoff race, or B, potentially fall off completely for this season. Patrick Damp and I will have a lot more on the next episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, some good takes there, eh? Those aged well. They just needed to do something with the goaltending, and 12 hours later, they did. And look, it's not just Jarry, though. Jarry's .886 save percentage is identical to Alex Nedeljkovic. Like, both their goalies can't stop the puck. So
no, and that's really the big issue. They're just getting no goaltending whatsoever. I believe if you take a look at
reminds me of a team I know last season.
Well, yeah. If you don't have good goaltending, you got nothing. I mean, Jamie Noodles McLennan of Overdrive, former NHL goaltender, always says that the league should be called goaltending, because if you got it, you're in a good spot. If you don't, and you're dash 36 and you've given up 173 goals through 46 games, more than any other team in the NHL, you're probably not going to win a whole lot of games. And that's exactly where the Pittsburgh Penguins find themselves now. Is that Blomqvist kid the answer as you pondered? I don't know. But if they don't find a goalie soon, I don't, it's a team that's just not going to be competitive. And if that's the case, what do you do for Kyle Dubas? Like, do you blow up the current day Crosby, Malkin Penguins? Like, do you blow this team up and try and retool or rebuild as quick as possible? Because there are a few players on that team that I'm sure some teams should be calling on. I mean, Rickard Rakell's having a resurging year. He's got 22 goals this year through 46 games. I'm sure a lot of teams would be interested in that. Brian Rust could be interested in that. Bringing back maybe a Michael Bunting could have some interest, right? Like, there's some teams out there. I know Marcus Pettersson's name has been brought up a bunch for teams looking to add some defensive depth within, their top four. So, there's some names that they really, really could fetch a decent haul for, and that's not to mention a Crosby or a Malkin or even possibly a Chris Letang. So if this is the end of the Penguins as we know it, I do look forward to seeing what could possibly happen and what could be available from that squad come the trade deadline. Because there's a lot of pieces out there that a lot of teams out there that would love to pick apart the Pens.
9 of the next 11 games for Pittsburgh are on the road, including that 7-game road trip that begins in Buffalo on Friday night. They go Buffalo, Washington. They do LA, Anaheim, Seattle, San Jose, and Utah. So that's going to be a huge moment, and the hits keep coming even off the ice. I don't know if you saw this, Mikey, but Evgeny Malkin's home was broken into on Saturday, and his 3 Stanley Cup rings are missing.
Oh, that sucks. That
the
sucks.
Worst.
All 3. Ugh, tough.
That's the worst. So hopefully, first and foremost, hopefully gets back those rings, because that's obviously something that is an enormous milestone and achievement in his career. But with the Penguins, they got to look forward on this road trip and try to get something cooking, because even though by points they're still in the mix, right? They're 4 points out of a playoff spot. They've played more games than everybody but Boston in the wild card race. So they need to turn it around and quick if the Penguins hope to have a playoff run, or at least games at the end of this regular season. Columbus feeling like they could look at the playoffs this season, and a big reason why is Zach Werenski. We'll explain after the break. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help the right candidates reach you faster. I've been in that spot. You need to hire like yesterday. You need it right now. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback for your business. That's exactly what Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy for. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. So now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com. Terms and conditions apply. You hiring? Indeed is all you need. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we have local experts on the biggest stories. So, Mikey, we are talking East today, and the wild card race in the East is just so juicy. You look out West, it's a 3-team race. You could throw St. Louis in the mix there. I think everybody below that is going to have a tough task coming up in the mix. Do you agree with that? Like, it's Calgary, Vancouver, and St. Louis. One of those 3 teams is getting in.
I wouldn't count Utah out of it. I don't think that's, and that's because, St. Louis has a couple of games in hand. I think Utah's right there, only 5 points back of Vancouver, 6 points back of Calgary. I think that's a team that might be in it. But yeah, like Anaheim, Seattle, Nashville's and San Jose have been as good as gone, and obviously Chicago. I might toss Utah into that mix as still having a possibility, but it's definitely a less intriguing wild card race than what we got cooking on the East side.
My problem with Utah, and this sucks for a new team, 6 wins in 20 home games this year for Utah. Like, that's tough. And the team we want to focus on this segment, Columbus, is the opposite. Columbus has one of the best home records in the National Hockey League, and they seriously struggle on the road. They are, though, winners of 5 straight games. They're 15-5-3 at home, 6-12-3 on the road. But they've got 48 points, and they are currently in a wild card spot, both by points and by points percentage. They're in the second wild card in both situations. Now, a huge reason why, you could argue that their Russian forwards are playing a huge role in this, and I would not disagree with you on that. They've got this Kirill Marchenko, who's just, to me, come out of nowhere. I know he's been a decent player, but he looks unbelievable. 48
Well,
points in 44 games. He's plus 26 in the league.
yeah. I mean, 2 years ago, he had a really, really good rookie season. Then last year, kind of followed it up with a sophomore slump, bit of an older rookie. And then this season, yeah, he's kind of,
Dude,
got back to being, a good player again. 48 points in 44 games is quite the number, quite the feat. But, Sean Monahan, point per game player for this team. They signed him as a free agent, and it's turned out to be a terrific signing. I mean, that Dmitry Voronkov kid you mentioned, he's got 17 goals. Cole Sillinger's got 23 points. Fantilli's starting to figure it out. Thing is, this team, they're fourth in the league in scoring. Like, they're just scoring a lot of goals, and it's a lot of depth scoring. They got a lot of guys who already are into double digits in goals, and it's not just come from one guy or two, three players. They're getting it up and down the lineup. And, when you've got depth like that, and you could score, you're going to win a lot of hockey games. They've been able to do that and find themselves in a playoff spot. I don't think a lot of people expected this, because obviously the tragedy from this past summer, thought it would be a bit of a tough grind for Columbus this year, but it's really powered them, and you could clearly feel that it fuels them to play for Johnny Gaudreau at home. It just gives them a sense, of power, essentially, is what it feels like. The record kind of indicates that, and it's really great to see for, an organization that's had a bit of a tough go since they got there, really. And, they finally are having themselves a season to be happy with. And, I'm happy for the fans out in Columbus.
Yeah, I think obviously Ottawa's in a race with them, so no disrespect to Columbus, but I'd rather see my team in the playoffs. But if Ottawa's in, I would love to also see Columbus get into a playoff spot. They've been through so much off the ice, and to band around tragedy and come together and have the season that they're having is just so, you just have to tip your hat to them, honestly. And there's still better days ahead for Columbus in terms of Adam Fantilli. He's had flashes this year, but only at a half a point per game and -7. He's going to improve over the course of time. I think Igor Chinikov has a lot more to give as well. I know he's missed a lot of time this season with injury. Like, if they get some better goaltending, like, not that their goaltending's been awful, but it hasn't been great this season. Their best goalie is Jet Greaves, who was great in the AHL last year. He's got a .906 save percentage. Like, they're doing it despite their starting goalie having an .889. Like, that's not far off from Tristan Jarry's save percentage this year, but they're outscoring their problems, and I think that's the most impressive part.
No, that's exactly what they're doing. And that Tarasov kid, I think, has played pretty well too. For them, I thought I read that he had been playing strong. Maybe lately.
Bad. Maybe lately. He's got 862 on the year with 4 wins in 11 games.
Yeah, it's not good. That's not great. I thought I saw a tweet or something about how he'd been playing well. Maybe he had one good game and somebody was just, over exaggerating.
Getting the tire pumps going.
He's actually played well despite the numbers, like one of those kind of things. But
yeah, his last win was October 22nd against Toronto. He's 0-5-1 since with an 837. So maybe it was after that Leafs game. Everyone's like, hey, here he goes.
Maybe it was Jet Greaves that I saw the tweet about then and not Tarasov. That maybe would make some more sense. But I mean, they've got some younger kids too, like Luca Del Belbaluz. There's a name for you.
Great handle.
He's come up and he's played a couple of games. He's got a goal already. Denton Matejchuk's a good young defenseman. He's factoring into this team. So, it's a big youth movement that has taken course over the last couple of years. It sounds like a couple of them are starting to kind of find their game. Fantilli's starting to find his game a little bit. And it's coming alongside, these veteran players who've been around for a while. Monahan's a longtime veteran. I know he's a first year in Columbus, but a longtime veteran. But I think, the guy who really is leading the charge here, as we've been talking about, is Zach Werenski. I mean, you look at a guy who has had a really good career, but it's been kind of injury laden, and he hasn't really had that breakout season. He had that 1 year. I think he scored 20 goals, and he was up there when it came to leading the league in goals for defensemen. But this season, 50 points in 44 games, 15 goals, 35 assists, 50 points in 44 games, averaging 26 minutes and 40 seconds of ice time. Like, Zach Werenski, this guy's playing himself into Norris caliber, Norris level conversation. I think he's third on FanDuel. We took a look behind Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. And if I had to cast my ballot today, dude, I would have to think real long and hard about putting Werenski at number 1.
No doubt. And even you look at the point totals, 50 this year. That's tied with Cale Makar for the most among NHL defensemen. He's played one less game than Cale Makar now. Asterisk there. Quinn Hughes missed a few games this year. He still leads all defensemen in points per game. But if you look at just the all-around aspect of what Zach Werenski's doing, it's impossible to ignore. He's currently on a 17-game home point streak. So he, like the team, has been performing amazing on home ice. He leads all NHL skaters in average time on ice, 26 minutes and 39 seconds. He's tied for first in not only points among defensemen, but he's alone in goals, 15 goals among all defensemen. And earlier in the show, I brought up from Boxing Day till now, talking about Detroit and their good players. Zach Werenski leads the entire NHL in points in the last month, like that, or in the last 3 weeks.
As a defenseman,
he deserves some serious respect for what he's doing right now. And I think the underlying numbers are all good for him as well. Like he's always been a highly touted player. He's had a little bit of trouble over the years staying healthy. Missed a lot of games over the course of his career, but he's healthy. He's thriving. He's playing great hockey, and I couldn't be happier to see it either.
Yeah, 100%. It's nice to see a guy who's gone through a lot throughout his career, and he was someone who was very highly impacted by the Gaudreau unfortunate Gaudreau incident this past summer too. So for both him and Sean Monahan to have the seasons that they're having for the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are finally winning some games, in particular in front of their home fans, it's been a real good story here in the early parts of the NHL season.
And Jay Forrester's tracking that all over at Locked On Columbus Blue Jackets. Thank you for making us your first listen today. And for more, make sure to check out all of our great Locked On podcasts on every team every day. For Mike DiStefano over at Locked On Maple Leafs, I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators, and we are your Wednesday hosts here on the Locked On NHL channel. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.